We do know that Harvey Weinstein is still at Bellevue Hospital, according to his attorney, doing well. In fact, he's telling them to hurry up with the appeal, and they're talking about even moving up the sentencing date because you can't file an appeal in New York until you've been sentenced. So that was a strategy discussed today, according to Arthur Adala, with Harvey Weinstein. Joining me now, the think tank is in the House, criminal defense attorney Douglas Chanco, family law attorney Randy Kessler, and in New York, criminal defense attorney Noreen Travers, and Richard St. Paul, trial attorney, civil rights attorney, also coming to us from New York. Richard, I want to start with you. And I want to talk about the fact that Harvey is in this hospital setting now. He's gone to Bellevue instead of Rikers Island, and people are looking into this and, oh, he's getting special treatment or he's lying about his health. Should people be reading too much into this? He is 67, he's got health issues, and he just found out he was found guilty.
Yeah, well, on top of the physical ailments, now there is, mental ailments to go along with that. So, I mean, no surprise there. Hello. But, whether he's faking this or not, we don't know. But we do know that he was found guilty, that he is facing, a long time in prison. And also, we know that we want to keep him out, that his attorneys want to keep him out of prison pending appeal. So this minor delay in whether his health, look, we'd rather be safe than sorry and see if he's healthy or not. But obviously, Harvey Weinstein wants to stay out of jail as long as he can. So I'm sure he's going to enjoy his time in the hospital. For a couple days, Noreen, keeping him out, trying to get him out pending appeal. That's a huge long shot, isn't it?
A huge long shot. I'd say it's almost an impossibility. They're going to have to go to the appellate division, and they're going to have to try to argue that there is such good reason that they're going to win this appeal that the judge would grant bail, which would be, bond, which would be against what the trial court judge would do. And I would say under the circumstances and with the weight of the evidence in this case, that's not going to happen.
Randy, he was talking
and with the sentence that he's going to face.
Yeah, Randy, when he was talking to his attorneys today, trying to get them motivated to file this appeal. Is he in denial?
That would be the word for it, denial. Optimistic. I mean, he's clinging to whatever he can cling to, and who knows how anybody would act if they were in that situation. But the ounce of hope, he thinks money buys everything. Money does buy him good lawyers, buys him good witnesses, buys him good experts. But you know what? Money can't buy away the truth, and he's going to have a really hard time because we got to remember, an appeal doesn't give the appellate court the right to second-guess the jurors and say, well, we don't really think he's guilty. They have to find legal error. Did the judge make a legal mistake? Did the judge let in evidence that he should not have let in? It's going to be hard to find legal error in this case.
Doug, what about Juror 11, brought in, who was allowed to stay on the panel, claims she was writing some sort of novel about predatory white male? Is that their best shot, or do they go after something else? They claim there's a ton of different things that they're going to be filing, but Juror 11 seems to be getting a lot of attention.
If you're in the appeals process, you're going to throw the kitchen sink at it at this point, because every shot you take is the only chance you have of not spending foreseeably the rest of his life behind bars at his age. Juror 11 may be the strongest route, but what happens if the appellate court says, we don't like that, we don't agree with it, we don't believe it? If you haven't taken every one of those other shots, there your chances go. So they're going to throw everything they can at it.
Today, one of the alleged victims of Harvey Weinstein took a stab at Donna Rotuno. Jessica Barth basically called her out. Take a listen.
I would like to say something to Donna Rotuno. I want to speak for the 1 in 3 women and the 1 in 4 men who are victims of sexual violence. And I want to say that it has nothing to do about putting yourself in that position. Accepting a meeting with a Hollywood icon who's produced every single independent film that you grew up loving, that made you fall in love with acting, that encouraged you and inspired you to come to work in this industry to begin with, is not putting yourself in that position. Being alone in your apartment and having that same person barge into your door and rape you is not putting yourself in that position. This is a man that Meryl Streep once called God. You would think if Meryl Streep referred to him as God, maybe you could trust him. Who does deserve and who has put himself in that position is Harvey Weinstein. And it is my hope that victims everywhere can look to this verdict, this guilty verdict, and have hope and the courage to come forward and know that you will be believed and your predator will be brought to justice.
Donna Rotuno had some things to say about Hollywood today, actually. We're going to play that, and we're going to get everybody's response, all these defense attorneys responding to the lob at Donna Rotuno right after this. Stay with us.
I don't want to live in a world where women feel like they don't have other choices. First of all, Harvey Weinstein was not the only game in town. Second of all, there are many other careers that you could find and paths that you can go down and not put yourself in situations. At some point, if you are saying, I want this career and I'm willing to do whatever I need to do to have that career, then at some point that is a choice that you're making.
All right, I want to get the opinion of our defense attorneys with us this evening. First of all, to the shot thrown out there that Donna Rotuno, how dare her basically blame victims. From your perspective, how did Donna Rotuno do? Did she cross any lines? Doug, start with you.
I don't think so. At this point, I understand how difficult it must be to watch somebody else who is the attorney going through what they think is the best way to present the case. There's a million different ways to go forward with everything, and you can second guess and say, if I'd done it this way, maybe you'd have a different result. At the end of the day, there's convictions related to 2 victims. That's the point. That's what's needed to have happen. That's what the state was supposed to do. They successfully were able to complete their job. I can understand why people would say, I don't like this or I don't like the way it was presented, but I don't think it means they've crossed a line.
Noreen, she was hired to do a job and she took it very seriously, did a very good job on many levels. Was the strategy a good one going in now, in retrospect, that now that we have the verdict? Was there a flaw in the strategy, or was it a good strategy to attack these victims who, quite frankly, their stories were flawed?
I think it was the only strategy that she could actually use. I mean, they had an overwhelming amount of evidence, I think, with all of the emails and the witnesses on the defense side, which typically you don't have to challenge these witnesses. And that's her job. I think that when she cross-examined the witnesses and the victims, I think that she was firm, but I don't think that she was rude to them. I think she just confronted them with what she had. And I think that's based on the investigations that she did before this trial. And I don't think she crossed any lines. I think the time that she went on the air, I guess on the podcast, and said that she wouldn't have put herself in this position, I mean, that wasn't before the jury, but that's not something I don't think is effective or would have been effective for her case. But as far as what she put before the jury, I think she did exactly what she had to do.
Richard, do you think that this jury listened to Judge Burke? This was a very long trial, and the media saturation was off the charts. From a practical standpoint, is it fair to assume that some jurors did at least feel the enormity of this, and that would be at the best case scenario? In the worst case scenario, maybe did dip into it or get some feedback from loved ones?
You know, look, jurors are human beings. This juror wasn't sequestered, so that means they got to go home to their family every night. They got to pick up the paper. They got to go onto the internet. So certainly, since they are human beings, certainly they've seen the gravity of this particular case. And all you have to do is report to jury duty on the Weinstein case, and you see all the cameras and the trucks outside. Now, whether or not the jury felt that they were influenced by the media, that's another thing. Typically, what I find is juries do get to look at the evidence, obviously, and contemplate the evidence and listen to what the judge says. So what am I saying? The jury takes their job seriously. And based upon what the evidence was, what was presented in court, I believe they made their decision based upon what they saw as evidence in the court and not because of the media.
Randy, today in Los Angeles on the courthouse steps, a press conference with the silence breakers. They're talking to the jury pool that's going to now be enlisted in this next round. How much of a difference does it make now for the LA case? People in LA, they watched what happened yesterday. They've monitored what's happened in New York, and now it's going to be front and center. Can he get a fair jury, or does the celebrity status that he brings to the table just change the game?
Well, it changes the game. Plus, this guilty verdict being in the back pocket makes it not so taboo to go up against somebody like this. And, on the other hand, there might be the jury that wanted to be the first one to take him down. You don't know how it's going to play. But that's what's fascinating about this case. I mean, that indictment by the criminal defense lawyer saying women shouldn't do this, it's not about women. It's about the two victims that were here in this case and whether they were believable, whether they were credible, or whether they gave consent. And that's what the lawyer went after in trial. In front of the media, it's a whole other story. Are they trying to protect his image? At this point, the lawyer has to focus on the exact acts complained of, the exact conduct complained of, because right now it's his liberty at stake. Forget his reputation. Did he do what he's accused of doing or not? That's going to have to be the focus of the case in LA.
Journalists are the ones that really did push this case to the forefront. Ronan Farrow, one of those journalists, he talked about the fact that now this is a different game. Take a listen.
We are seeing vastly overdue change in the legal system, in the culture, in the way companies handle non-disclosure agreements, in the way media companies are willing or not willing to cover up these kinds of crimes when they have evidence of them. That is all a relief to many of the women who suffered at the hands of Harvey Weinstein, who raised these allegations. But there's a long way to go. Cyrus Vance Jr., the Manhattan district attorney, in 2015, this is one of the stories we broke in the New Yorker, shut down an effort to charge Weinstein, even though they had a taped confession from a police sting of him admitting to an assault. They dropped that effort to charge him. And then just in the last 24 hours, you have Cyrus Vance celebrating this conviction and saying it doesn't matter if a woman reports immediately or years after, it's a crime, it's serious. So you see a real transformation in how leadership figures in the criminal justice system have to behave around this.
Travers, are we going to see a different stance from prosecutors that maybe in the past would be reluctant to go to trial with just a he said, she said case and no physical evidence? Does this change the game?
I think it does, and I think that there's a lot of pressure now on prosecutors, especially in New York City, to move those cases forward. I've worked in the Manhattan DA's office as a prosecutor. I've been a defense attorney with cases against the Manhattan DA's office. And I have to say there are times I've been disappointed when I've represented victims even that they haven't pushed cases forward. And I am hoping that for those victims that they do take those cases more seriously. And I think that this case, highlights it so much that it's going to be hard for them not to, because if they don't, then they just did this special treatment because he was Harvey Weinstein. And that's not going to look good at all.
Richard St. Paul, the Ambra Gutierrez came forth in 2015. Cyrus Vance shut down that prosecution, that investigation, saying that, that it was flawed. They were, I guess, unwilling to go up against that Harvey Weinstein. This was before the articles came out, before the avalanche of accusations. That was when he was a very powerful person. How much does power and money bleed into our system?
Well, look, it's a totally different game when you have power and money. Obviously, the prosecution is looking at, they know that you have the power and money, and they don't want to bring any what could be deemed frivolous charges, so the prosecution will do as much as they can to prove their case. And if they don't have the evidence, and they know that the person that's powerful and rich can afford the best attorneys that money can buy, they don't want to bring a case without having strong enough evidence. And that goes for today and into the future. That's just how it is. The more resources you have, the more likely you are to fight the government should they prosecute you, whether you're guilty or innocent. And that's just the way our system is unfortunately set up, that those that don't have the money can't always buy the best defense.
Randy, prosecutors are inherently scared of losing, right? And when they know that someone is well-funded, they're not going to press charges unless the case is airtight. Will that change in sex assault cases post-Weinstein, post-Me Too?
I don't know. I think it depends on the prosecutor. And it's not just that they don't want to take a case that they're going to lose because they're going to have egg on their face. I mean, this is taxpayer money, right? We're all paying for these prosecutors to work, and we want them to bring cases they're going to win. If they cannot win a case, then they shouldn't bring it. They should try to plead, they should undercharge, whatever it is. I don't think it's going to change the analysis of, can we win this case? Are the facts there? Are the witnesses there? Is the evidence there? If they think they can win a case, they should prosecute. If they don't think they can win a case, they shouldn't.
Doug, do you agree that this really isn't going to change the game because it is so entrenched? And when you do factor in judicial economy and the finances, it just doesn't make sense sometimes to pursue.
High-profile cases are always going to get the most attention, no question about it. I don't think that changes at all, regardless of what happens in California related to Weinstein or if this is the end. That being said, with cases that are more every day, and it is this he said, she said, potentially when they're making that charging decision, they'll say, yeah, let's move forward more. And we could see a change in general across the nation in reference to more cases with lack of direct evidence and just two witnesses, and one says one thing and one says the other.
Many of the victims in this case, or alleged victims, say that it is going to change. The game has changed. Here's Dawn Dunning.
He's a convicted rapist, and that is, victory to all women, particularly the women who have come forward. I don't look at this as the end of a trial. It's the beginning of something bigger.
All right, we're going to step aside, take a break. When we come back, your reaction on social media. Will Harvey Weinstein spend the rest of his life behind bars, or do you think he'll get out at some point? That coming up.
I just visited Harvey Weinstein, what looks like a typical hospital room with a hospital bed, and I was pleasantly surprised that he was in pretty good spirits. He was energized and somewhat motivational for the whole team, everyone who's working for him, to keep working. He's been insistent I met him just about a year ago, until yesterday, the day of the verdict, until just now, declaring his innocence. And he is somewhat flabbergasted by the verdict, because there are only two people who know what really took place in that hotel room regarding Mimi Haley, and it's Harvey Weinstein and Miriam Haley. And he just said, go back and look at her initial press conference. What she said in the press conference doesn't even jive with what she said on the stand, which shows she should not have been found credible. So there is a portion of him where he's just scratching his head, and he just doesn't know how this happened. But he's cautiously optimistic that when the Appellate Division First Department really examines what took place throughout this case, before the trial began, meaning the Molyneux decisions, the prior bad act decisions, the decisions that were made that kind of prevented Mr. Weinstein from testifying, he's confident in the appellate judicial system that he will be exonerated.
When will that take place? When will you be able to appeal?
In the state of New York, you can't file an appeal until after the sentencing. The sentencing is on March 11th. Mr. Weinstein and I discussed possibly moving that a little sooner. We'll see if that's in the realm of possibilities, but he does have to go through certain city bureaucracy, being interviewed by the Department of Probation, etc., before he can be sentenced. I just asked him again about sharing that with you, and he said absolutely. When we first heard not guilty, there was a degree, and that had to do with the Annabella Sciorra charge. There was a large degree of relief, and then we wanted to hear the not guilty again, but we didn't for Miriam Haley. And I think he took a second, and he just looked over at me, and he kept shaking his head. He goes, "But I'm innocent. I'm innocent. I'm innocent. How could this happen in America?"
Harvey Weinstein proclaiming his innocence today in the New York hospital where he was taken after he was found guilty. Time for your comments on social media. The question today, will Harvey Weinstein ever see the light of day? Will he ever get out of jail/prison? First comment, the comment of the day comes from Nancy Figner. No. They will appeal, and that will take forever. By the time it comes for him to serve time, he'll actually be dead. And as you can see, he didn't go to jail. He went to the hospital where he can talk to anyone he wants and get waited on. I'll be very surprised if he serves any time. Richard, he's going to serve time. That's for sure. But what kind of preferential treatment is he getting in a, not just the hospital, because he is eventually going to be moved to Rikers Island in the interim before he's sentenced. What kind of difference is it in the medical units, the infirmary of a jail/prison? It's still jail, it's still prison, right?
Well, it's still jail and it's still prison, absolutely. There's still bars and there's still correction officers, and you can't exactly go outside and feed the pigeons. So what happens is that he more than likely will be isolated from the general population, which means that he won't be in with everybody else. He'll probably have, take a shower by himself, be in a jail cell by himself, use the telephone if he needs to by himself, and do a lot of things without other people around. Or very few people, those people who are in the same type of segmented, protected, jail areas. So without the general population, which was understandably so. I mean, he is a high-profile person. He's 67 years old. It's probably not a good idea for him to go into that and especially as a accused rapist.
Yeah.
To go into general population.
And after Jeffrey Epstein, the state of New York doesn't need Harvey Weinstein coming into any issues along those lines. Next comment, considering the fact that Judge Burke is extremely pro-prosecution, my guess would be anywhere between 15 and 20 years, talking about the sentence, and he's 67 now. Noreen, what do you think Judge Burke's going to do? You agree 15?
I
that
think
sounds really,
it's going to be a minimum.
Oh, go ahead.
Excuse me? Yeah, no. I mean, I know Judge Burke. I'm familiar with his sentencing. I think that it's not going to be any less than 15 for the two. I mean, you can base your sentencing on, they're going to the defense is going to put a sentencing memo together saying what a good person he is, how many things he's done for the community. But ultimately, you have all of these accusers who say the horrible things he's done to women, and he has two charges against him. One that has, a sentence between 5 and 25 years, the other one that's up to 4 years. I've tried cases that have been like violent felonies, which is essentially what his top charge is, and they have far less, accusers against them than Harvey Weinstein, and they received 10 years. So I would be surprised if he got anything less than 15, which in his case is going to be a life sentence. And I think Judge Burke is going to know that.
Next comment. With his age and his health issues, I do believe he will die in prison. So yes, he will do life in prison, agreeing basically with Noreen. Randy, do you agree that 15, I mean, he'll be out, if he's sentenced to 15, theoretically he'd be eligible for parole and maybe out good behavior, feeding the pigeons, as Richard said, in 6-7 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he was Hulk Hogan or some, one of these old iconic people that are really in great shape, but he's obviously not in great shape already. And the stress, you can't overestimate how much this stress is going to put on his body and his condition. 15 years, it's going to be hard for him to get out and have any kind of life if he makes it that long. This judge wants him to go to jail. This judge didn't let him stay out pending sentencing, pending a bail hearing. He already said, no, get in handcuffs, go directly to jail. We see the writing on the wall.
Next comment, coffee is my life, says, honestly, I'm not even sure anymore. It can go one of two ways. You can get hit with a hard sentence like life because he's a big name case and they'll make an example out of him, or not a damn thing. Minimum sentence and rehabilitation program they will have for sex addicts. That's not going to happen, Doug. It's not on the table. He has a 5-year minimum with the most serious charge. So he's looking at, 5 years minimum. That's not going to happen either. To Noreen's point, it's going to be much longer than that. People shouldn't be concerned that he's going to get special treatment here on the back end after conviction.
Of course. I mean, the judge cannot deviate below the minimums, regardless of his age and the situation. And the fact is that when the lights go out and the door slams shut on a nightly basis, Harvey Weinstein is going to be very well aware of the fact that he is sitting in custody, he has no freedom, and an 8x8 cell is going to shrink on him every single day.
Danny Gonzalez says, I think he'll get freed on appeal, then be sent back in and will die in prison. He's already 3/4 of the way to death. He won't last 6 years. Yeah, all right. That comment, you know, what? He's 67, but he could easily live much longer than that. Let's talk, though, about the appeal. He says he's going to be freed on appeal. We just heard from Arthur Adala sort of talk about a few of the things that they are targeting on appeal, and one of that is the Molyneux witnesses that came in, and something really struck me. Something that he said the decisions that were made by Judge Burke, which on some level prevented Harvey Weinstein from taking the stand. Richard, what is he talking about?
You know, that's interesting. I heard the same thing that he said, but you know, a lot of what he's talking about, these pre-trial motions, these are the motions that the judge decided prior to going to trial, and they can be everything from what testimony is allowed, what expert witness is allowed, what prior bad acts are going to be spoken about. So there's a lot of other information that happened before the trial took place that the judge made a decision on that's going to go right into the appeal. There's going to be a lot to pick at for the appellate division in terms of different items of error that even juror number 11, items of error that the appellate court can say, yeah, there's a good possibility that Mr. Weinstein, some of these things should be overturned. So I think there's going to be a lot in there. And as I was said earlier, the kitchen sink is going to be in that appeal.
All right, and then, of course, the next thing on the horizon is Los Angeles, and that factors in as well. We're anticipating that the sentencing will happen on the 11th. That's when it is set for. But we heard Arthur Adala today say that he, after talking to Harvey Weinstein, he's going to actually talk about maybe moving it up because Harvey is so intent on getting that sentencing hearing so that he can file an appeal. We'll have to wait to see what happens with that. All right, stay with us. We're going to take a break right now, or not. We're going to first check in with Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter. She's going to preview what is next for Harvey Weinstein.
Up next for Harvey Weinstein, sentencing for his 2 felony convictions happening yesterday. Now, this is set for March 11th in just a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, there will be a pre-sentencing report conducted as well as sentencing memorandums filed ahead of this hearing, which is expected to last an entire day. At that time, both the prosecution and defense can put on evidence and factors they want the judge to consider when determining whether or not Harvey Weinstein will receive up to 29 years maximum for the 2 convictions in the verdict yesterday. Now, we spoke to Gloria Allred, who represents one of the witnesses, Mimi Haley, and she says that Mimi is wanting to be a part of the sentencing hearing, wanting to give a victim impact statement if possible. Then the defense team has indicated they will file for appeal upon the conviction. They feel they can be successful on many grounds in the appellate division to hopefully overturn the conviction yesterday. And of course, looming over Harvey Weinstein, the Los Angeles charges. He faces 4 more sex crimes in Los Angeles. And while the DA's office says they are proceeding with those charges against Harvey Weinstein, the timing of that case is still uncertain. That's the latest, Ted. I'll send it back to you.
All right, a momentous occasion. Chanley's last report from New York on the Harvey Weinstein case. A lot of our viewers are pleased that this is wrapping up. So what are we going to do next? Well, we're going to preview our next live trial right after this. Welcome back. Our next live trial on Court TV starts tomorrow with opening statements. Daniel Welty is facing first-degree murder in Missouri for allegedly killing his wife. Echo Welty was murdered in November of 2016, just days after her son committed suicide. The defendant allegedly shot and killed his wife after an argument in a hotel parking lot. Witnesses say a person tried to stop the shooting, but Welty moved past that man that was trying to intervene and killed his wife. What on earth could the defense in this case be? Well, we'll find out for sure tomorrow morning when we listen to the opening statements. But right now, we can, of course, opine about it. Let's bring in the think tank. Noreen Travers, if you're representing this defendant, Daniel Welty, you've got eyewitnesses. He was going through a bitter divorce. What's his defense? What could it be?
I guess he would have to say that he was mentally ill, because I can't imagine what else he could use. I mean, if he can't use the Miss ID, He could use, if he can't use self-defense, that's really the only thing that he can fall back on. Of course, they probably didn't make him any offers, so he really figures, why not go to trial? What else, what else can he do in a situation like this? But I really can't think of anything else other than mental incapacity.
Doug Chanco, if you're representing him, what's your defense?
This case is a bad country song between a divorce, the loss of his family. The only thing we're missing is the dog that's been lost in this Missouri case. And I'd tell you, with all of that, I would say that sometimes somebody needs killing, and he was the right person to be able to do it. And that would be our defense under the law. Temporary insanity based on having to deal with the loss of his child, the loss of his marriage, the loss of his family. And I would fire that and sell it as hard as possible.
Richard, boy, if you go with that one, you really need a specific juror, don't you?
You sure do. I mean, look, this is a tough case, especially when you have a witness and literally a smoking gun there. Look, the best part of this case is that the prosecution has to prove their case. Maybe they slip up. Then if they don't, if they have a very, very strong case, which it sounds like they do, but we'll find out tomorrow, then you definitely got to go with some type of insanity defense, which works in less than 5% of defenses. So good luck with that.
Randy, your thoughts?
Wow. Sympathetic juror. You hope that one person on the jury says, that poor guy, he couldn't take it. I could almost see myself doing that sometime. You get one person like that on the jury, maybe you get lucky.
How about, Noreen, the death of his son? They literally just come from his funeral. The loss of a child. Do you look for a juror with children and who might be sympathetic there that he did have temporary insanity and he blamed his wife for his son's suicide?
Well, I don't know that I would pick a woman with children, because if I were on that jury and I have children, I'd think, why wouldn't you just kill yourself? Why do you have to kill the mother of this son? Possibly someone older who's seen a lot, who's seen people who have broken down in situations like this. Maybe social workers would be good. But it's going to be a tough jury to pick, that's for sure.
Doug, who's your ultimate juror?
I'm not looking at a particular person. I'm looking for someone who is willing to listen, because you're going to have to sell and sell hard. This is a situation where I'm looking for people that would say, you don't blame a wounded animal that's been harmed when it turns around and bites you after being injured. You say, what caused that to happen? And that's my client. He is the wounded animal. So I don't need a particular person. I need an individual that will listen and be agreeable to thinking more than just, he's holding a gun, what else is there?
Yeah, but Randy, you put down a rabid animal, don't you, who's gone wild. The defense here, is there anything that would you bring in an expert to get this point across, that maybe this suicide changed him, or how?
You bring in as many experts as you can, and you may even have them testify. As crazy as that sounds, somebody says, I see something in this guy that I see in myself, and I don't know what it is. I mean, who knows who bonds with him? You got to throw everything up against the wall and hope that one thing sticks.
Richard, don't you have to put him on the stand?
You don't have to, but if he could tell a story that nobody else can, and that's going to relate to somebody on the jury, because remember, you're going to go through the juror's life before you select them, so you're going to know a lot about your jury panel. So you definitely, if he has a story that nobody else can tell that will make one of the jurors relate, you can maybe end up with a mistrial at best. But yeah, you certainly would put him on the stand if, again, he has something to say and add to a story that nobody else can.
Doug, from the prosecution standpoint, you just play this down the middle and make sure you don't screw it up, right?
Absolutely. It is plain and simple, ladies and gentlemen. He had motive, opportunity, witnesses that saw it. There were people doing everything in their power to stop him, and the innocent bystander witness couldn't stop him. 4 shots is not a mistake. It wasn't I squeezed the trigger one time accidentally. 4 shots is intent. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a guilty conviction.
Right, Noreen, that is another horrible fact for the defense, is it not? That he also evaded someone who tried to intercede. Apparently an individual got in between him and his wife while they were battling out in this Days Inn parking lot where she was living because they were going through a divorce. Yep, Noreen's done. She just she just went out. That was beautiful. Down for the count. Randy, bad fact, isn't it, that he went around someone who was trying to intervene and 4 shots?
Yeah. You know, as a prosecutor, these are actually the cases you don't want to prosecute, and as a defense lawyer, it's a case you want to defend because the facts are there. But as a prosecutor, how do you mess this one up? You could mess this up, and how do you live with not being able to get a conviction? As a defense lawyer, the whole world thinks he's going down, that he's going to be found guilty, put away, and maybe the defense lawyer does something so skillful that he protects his client, keeps his client from a conviction. This is the kind of cases that make defense lawyers names. When you win a case like this, whew.
Right, Richard, we've seen it before, right? You know, you see a case where it's a no-brainer. This guy's going down, and for whatever reason, they either walk or there's a hung jury. It's not, you have to go through it.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, there's people there's video of alleged crimes being committed, and we all think that there's nothing greater than video if you don't have an eyewitness. And then sometimes, you know, that's just not enough because the video only tells one part of the story. Eyewitnesses aren't always reliable. That's why it takes a lot of evidence to get a conviction. It's not as simple as people believe. But, you know, for the prosecution side, they always add a lesser offense in there. So even if you're not convicted of the top charge, it's likely the jury can go to the second lesser included offense.
And Noreen, isn't that the goal here? Get some sort of lesser so that he doesn't spend the rest of his life in jail, prison?
They could charge that, you know, in the indictment, or they could ask for that at the end of if they could ask the judge if he could add that, and the jury can consider it at the end of the trial if they've made out the elements to that. I mean, I feel like in this case, the best bet for the defendant is if he's led, you know, a very pious life, and then this just was a complete aberration to how he's ever behaved before. And that would be a reason, I think, at the end to add in a lesser included.
All right. We're going to find out tomorrow what the strategy will be for the defense opening statements. We're expecting them tomorrow morning, and we'll have them for you right here on Court TV. I want to thank everybody in the think tank and remind you that coming up tonight, right after this program, we have back-to-back episodes of Court TV's original true crime series, OJ 25. Get caught up on the episode 4 at 9 o'clock, episode 5 at 10, and then our next one premieres on Thursday night. Brand new episodes right here on Court TV. Thanks for joining us.